DreamMachine. My name is Arun.
And my name is Patricia.
Hey Patricia, got a lot on your mind today?
Yes, it's a lot in my mind today. You could say that it's mega.
Yeah. So, this is going to be quite a super encounter, though I don't know, there's part of me that believes it's not going to be as super as, other superhero films we've seen.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's, for a title like Megamind, it's anything but.
Okay, here we go. So Megamind, first known as Mastermind and then Ubermind, is a DreamWorks animation 21st film. The film received generally positive reviews, but I got to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure where these positive reviews lie. So.
Now, here's the thing. We cannot talk about Megamind without talking about another movie that came out the same year that had a similar premise. Despicable Me.
Yeah.
Despicable Me actually came out a few months before Megamind, and it had the same premise about a villain who has a good side to him. And that one turned out to be a lot more successful, pretty much so that it kickstarted another studio that would be known for making animated features, which is Illumination Entertainment. Mm-hmm. And, now, pretty much for a lot of people, Illumination is kind of similar to Blue Sky, in which they just do a lot of safe movies that, target towards, young kids. But for some reason, they make a lot of money on it.
Yeah. So, the story of this film, just to start with this, it's, at the very beginning, it does feel like it's all shoved in your face, doesn't it? Right.
It's actually kind of funny. So we start off with this superhero by the name of Metro Man, and he's the most cockiest superhero ever. He just has this big smile, and everybody's loving him and respecting him, and then in comes the villain, Megamind, and everybody just treats him like garbage, and Metro Man is treated with all this respect, and it's.
But it's at the very beginning, it's kind of he's destined to be kind of like this. It's kind of like everything's kind of been set up against him already. They try their best to kind of make him, try and make you sympathize of why he ended up being the way he is, and the premise is just ridiculous. It's just who keeps a baby, an alien baby, in a prison? When do you think he'd be carted off with, to the same place, they keep Monsters versus Aliens?
Yeah, exactly.
Assuming that they all exist in the same world,
again, it's still up for a debate if with the DreamWorks movies even belong in the same universe. We don't even know.
Yeah, it's confusing for me because it's I know they're probably playing it up for comedy, but it just doesn't seem. I don't know. It just seems a bit unreal. Wouldn't it be better if they brought him up in in a bad neighborhood or something like that, and so he was treated so badly, the only way he could obviously respond in surviving this neighborhood would be to be kind of a villain himself. Maybe.
Yeah, or maybe the fact that he does have the blue skin and the gigantic head, and everybody's constantly making fun of him. It's I'm trying to be nice to people, and it just turned out to be shoved in my face. It's some people who are kind of born and kind of trying to. They're almost they were destined to be evil, kind of like Eric from the Phantom of the Opera, or Jinx from Teen Titans, in which they either have a power or they look a particular way, and they're automatically dubbed as evil. But Megamind, he's very similar to Gru from Despicable Me. There's a sympathetic side to him that is kind of trying to be funny, but you kind of see the evil side of him, but it's just mostly played for comedy.
Yeah, and so obviously you get Metro Man, which is he, even from like the beginning when they're at the school, that he's the guy who's going to be the hero, and he's the guy everyone's going to like, and it's just I just don't like how it's just kind of like shoved in, and even at the very beginning, even before the official, I guess you could say the official Megamind Metro Man rivalry kind of like starts, like even in school they're kind of like, it's just like, it kind of reminds me of something you probably like see in Earthworm Jim, or like something you see like in like the just something they would play for laughs in like Animaniacs or something like that, like
Yeah, I guess what they were trying to do is like I guess they were trying to be like a parody of superheroes because this came out in 2010. So superhero movies were starting to become really popular with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We had Iron Man, Captain America, and I believe Iron Man 2 and Thor. I'm not sure which one came out, or the Incredible Hulk. But yeah, superhero movies were starting to become really popular. And I guess maybe for the kids, it's like, hey, let's start making fun of them, as opposed to like something like The Incredibles, in which it's like an homage to like classic superheroes and, doing it in a very unique way. So I guess it's like trying to lampoon the fact that, hey, you have a villain. What if he's the good guy? And I think that they pulled it off much better in Wreck-It Ralph, because with Wreck-It Ralph, it's a similar premise in which like he's the villain of a video game and everybody hates him because he's the villain, and he tries to make himself good, trying to prove himself that, hey, just because I'm called a villain doesn't mean I have to be one.
yeah, exactly. But and also on top of that as well, like Wreck-It Ralph was programmed to kind of like be in that. Like it's I don't know. I like the premise of where Ralph comes from more than I can sympathize more with him than I can sympathize with Megamind. Because
Yeah.
I mean, Megamind, in regards to like him being thrown in a prison, like he didn't have to, obviously be a bad kid. He could have easily have like reformed his ways and entered into society and been a positive contributor to that. Like I don't again the prison thing just kind of bothers me a little
And also
bit.
another thing is that, again, I know I'm going to be comparing this to Gru, but with Gru, I can kind of see why he decided to become a villain, because he was like a boy genius and he was unappreciative by his mom. He would make a whole bunch of things and his mom would just be unimpressed, and he felt like he never got any attention. So he decides, hey, I'm going to become a villain. I'm going to do the best that I can. And, he's like the worst villain of the bunch. He tries to come up with plans of shrinking the moon and, putting it in his pocket and taking it over. But, everybody just calls him a failure. And it's like with Megamind, nobody treats him seriously. It's like Metro Man is like he's so cocky because of his perfect hair and perfect teeth, and he can fly, and he's been the foil of Megamind for so long. It's like it's like, oh, the reason why he's bad is because of that reason. It just feels incredibly vague, and there should have been a lot more build up.
It just feels it's also full of cheese as well. Like oh hey, it kind of Metro Man reminds me of Syndrome from The Incredibles.
I think that's what they were going for, because he kind of has like a similar look to Syndrome. Him being in white with the cape and the cocky attitude. I think they were trying to do Syndrome, except that they did it 6 years too late.
Yeah, well, it's like they didn't do it very well either, because you just didn't feel. You looked at him and you thought, you were kind of like you're being thrown, like, oh, this hero's going to do something villainous, and like, Megamind's going to stop him. I thought, like, the way that they were kind of building this up, and so let's get to the part where he supposedly gets killed. And by the way, spoiler.
Yeah,
we always do spoilers
spoiler
in the
alert.
show, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a massive spoiler for those who haven't seen the movie. Yeah. But right before we get into the spoiler, I just want to, going back to The Incredibles again, and I'm sorry I'm going to be comparing, these two movies, but it's or three if you want to count Wreck-It Ralph.
How can you not? Like, they look eerily similar. You think that these could take place in the same universe.
Right. But I just want to bring up something. So The Incredibles was actually more influential to cartoons than some people give credit for. After The Incredibles came out, there were so many cartoons that I remember that had a superhero family, or a family of secret agents, or a family of stuff like that. I guess a combination of Spy Kids and the Incredibles. I've seen a lot more cartoons over the past couple of years that had a similar premise about like families coming together and they do something secret and cool. Like The X's is a good example on that, in which is a family of secret agents that try to plays off the Incredibles vibe, and The Replacements is also another one, and there's plenty of others, but you get what I'm trying to say. So The Incredibles was heavily influential in terms of like, hey, let's create a superhero family, or let's create a fun, action-packed cartoon that has superheroes that have like a pleasant attitude, and the villain who's like really hilarious. And I feel like they, there's a lot of them that they just kind of like fell apart and didn't know what made The Incredibles so good in the first place. And so I think Megamind definitely misses the mark. I mean, it's like you have a villain who's kind of incredibly bland and has no depth in his character other than he looks weird, he's super smart, he wants to take over the city because he wants to get back at Metro Man, and there's a love interest. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
And then Metro Man, again, spoilers with the movie. So yeah, Metro Man apparently was getting sick and tired of being a superhero, so he faked his own death, and he has been hiding away for a long time, thinking that, and Megamind thought that he actually killed him.
Well, we didn't know that till the final third of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't know about that at all.
Yeah, and so I really like to. I mean, if we're going to move on to that, I mean, like, it is a bit of a cop out, isn't it? The way, like, it's like, oh, I faked my own death because this was what I was always going to be. It's like, yeah, for like maybe a couple of hours, maybe, like, and then you can just go off and do something else when Megamind's in prison. Like, because if the world is basically, oh, I'm the superhero and the only thing I ever do is stop Megamind. Like, if that's what's been built here, then, you have plenty of time to go and do something else with your life.
It kind of reminds me of a Powerpuff Girls episode in which, they are so tired of saving Townsville, and they feel like, maybe if we just take a break, then, maybe somebody else can help save them. And at first it kind of does with the police and all that stuff. And then, they have these giant monsters, and then, the villains like Mojo Jojo coming along, and they can't do anything about it. They're completely useless. And so they call for the Powerpuff Girls for help. And then there's another episode in which when the Powerpuff Girls decide to have a race, and then they end up going far into the future, and Townsville is completely destroyed, and everyone looks depressed because the Powerpuff Girls have been gone for so long. So it would have been a really nice commentary about how people relied so much on superheroes that even something as like the police has become completely useless, because for the most part that's true. Like, police officers in superhero cartoons or movies are worthless. Mm-hmm. So the superheroes pretty much have no choice but to fight crime and to stop the bad guys from blowing up the city or causing millions of casualties or something like that. Yeah. I felt like this would have been a great opportunity, but no, it just comes across as pretty shallow and just reinforcing the joke that, oh, all I do is stop the bad guy and that's it. It's like, there could have been so much more than that.
Yeah, it's on top of that as well, like, I think there's less sympathy for Metro Man because all you got to do is see him stop Megamind. You never got to see him do anything else. Like,
yeah, exactly.
At least not until the final, or technically not until the final third, where Megamind disguises himself as Metro Man and fights off Titan. Like,
right.
But even then,
oh God, Titan. We'll get to that. Like, again, I can see what they were going with. They were, trying to create a new superhero to stop off Megamind, because Megamind has pretty much taken over the entire town after Metro Man was apparently killed off.
Which makes no sense to me, that whole storyline of like, oh, I'm depressed now because I've taken over the entire world. It's kind of like, it's, sorry, you've taken over the city. Like, yeah, you've taken over the city. Like, why not move on to, like, dominating the Earth? Like,
yeah, exactly. Dominate the Earth, dominate planets, be like Frieza, in which you're a galactic emperor, destroying planets at your own will, or, taking over various small countries and, having them worship you as a god.
And he's a villain from another galaxy. Like, is he not aware of, like, the universe around him? Like,
is the town just so... it's like, is this like the main town of the entire world? Is this like Metropolis or something, in which like this one town is like the cornerstone of everything in the entire world?
Yeah, it's
I'm
kind of
sure that
like
there's.
it's kind of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where kind of like like when they travel back and they travel back to like the '80s dimension, and like so the '80s turtles only like exist within this kind of like this perpetual city, and they just like throw garbage at like villains and stuff.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's the way the world. Yeah, there's not much world building here.
Yeah, it's very limited. Now, unlike previous DreamWorks films in which, you got to travel and lots of parts of, the world, with the Shrek franchise, we went from Duloc to Far, Far Away and various other places. We had Kung Fu Panda was a similar thing. How to Train Your Dragon was a similar thing. But here, I mean, it's just like centered in this one town when you had the entire world to play around with. I mean, with Despicable Me, it made sense for Gru because he was the worst villain. And, even with Wreck-It Ralph, he traveled to multiple video games.
It just feels unnerving. Like, do you remember the what's that car? It's going. You remember the Justice League cartoon TV series when they travel back through a dimension and they find like they're like they travel they find like the comic book versions of themselves. Like I can't remember. It's like the Justice Guild, I think it was called, and it's like in this really perfect little town, and like there's nothing going wrong with it, and then they find out that it's actually been taken over by this villain who gets them all to like play like make believe and things like that, and then they finally defeat him, and the whole thing just kind of crumbles apart, and they all disappear. Like,
almost kind of like Link's Awakening, almost in a sense.
It's in which, really unnerving, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of disturbing. It's like you have this perfect little town, and when Link plays the song to wake up the Windfish, everything disappears because it was all a dream. So it's like, or something like The Walking Dead, in which like the governor, he's taking over like this part of almost like a town almost, and everybody's living happily just as long as they follow the governor's rules, and the governor is like ruling like a dictator, and and they find that there's something like completely wrong with what's going on, and again, that makes a lot of sense, but I think that they should have played a lot more to the world building in Megamind, and I guess they decided not to because, then we need to focus on the amazing complex characters in this movie. I'm being sarcastic, by the way.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the love interest, because that's pretty much all she is. She's essentially Lois Lane because she's a reporter and she has a huge crush on the superhero, and that's pretty much it. And I mean,
well, it's kind of weird because like she's got like obviously the cameraman. I completely forgot what his name is.
His what was it, like Hal?
Hal,
or
yeah,
something?
it was Hal, yeah, something like that. And so it's like she's like the journalist, and then Hal would like try and like.
I guess Hal is like if Roxie is like Lois Lane, so is Hal Jimmy? Is that what it is?
I have absolutely no idea, but it's it's just none of the side characters are any fun either when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought, hey, we have a tough, female who's not a damsel in distress. I mean, maybe she was, and then maybe she starts to become tougher in the movie because, it's about like diverging stereotypes. How
at one point I thought she was going to be the person to get the serum, and she was going to kick the shit out of Megamind. I thought.
Yeah, because exactly, because she like really despises Megamind. Megamind. She hates
Megaman.
Megaman.
How different would this movie be if it was Megaman?
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Okay, so the reason why she doesn't hate Megamind as much is because Megamind has a huge crush on her, and he decides to disguise himself as a regular human, and they start going out on dates and talking to one another, and she starts having a little bit of a crush on him, not knowing that is actually Megamind.
Yeah, just this.
And in the meantime, we have.
But what's the point of that storyline? I don't I mean, I get they're trying to they're kind of like trying to put in like, oh, he's not, he's more than meets the eye or whatever, and I guess
Yeah,
Transformers
something
was
like
popular
that.
back then
And,
as well.
and you know what? They lost an opportunity to kind of like do an homage to the Batman the Animated Series episode where somebody was trying to play a joke on the Penguin saying like he's part of high society, and the woman, she slowly starts to fall in love with him in real life, and then when the Penguin found out that it was all a joke, and she tries to ask him for forgiveness and to maybe give another shot at this relationship, he's like no, because then he realizes about how much how much of a liar that she was, and how the whole thing was just nothing but a joke. And I think that that would have been a really good opportunity to like, maybe she wanted to get to know Megamind because, maybe she wants to find a weakness to stop him. And, maybe she wants to have an opportunity to give some insight to the quote unquote superhero that she wants to make out of Hal. And no, it turns out that that's not the case. And this whole thing about like Hal becoming really jealous of the Megamind who's disguising himself as the human, and then eventually he turns out to be the villain. I mean, I guess it's a really interesting twist. It's like, oh, the hero becomes the villain and the villain becomes the hero. But the character is just not that interesting. I'm sorry. I don't really like him very much.
I don't. Yeah, I just feel lost a little bit. Like another fact that all of a sudden Megamind decides that he's bored and now wants to create his own hero in order to fight him, and then he finds he loses control of that, and then he ends up coming up with a solution to beat that, and so ends up kind of like resolving the thing that he did in the first place. Like and also on top of that, like it's a messy story. Like in the second and third act, like because it just doesn't feel like. I mean, the main thing here is that here's a by the time you got to the second act, it's like here's a villain who has basically lost a hero and doesn't know what to do. And then even I myself, I'm thinking, okay, there's no good payoff for this. And
yeah, exactly. There's no motivation.
Yeah, I mean, what direction do you go in from that? I would have thought.
I think
it feels like like in Robot Chicken, where like say for example, like Skeletor kills He-Man by freak accident, and then finds out, oh, I can finally take over Eternia, and then doesn't know what to do afterwards, and then it just finishes there. That's the end of the segment. Like it's like it feels like they tried to take a Robot Chicken sketch and try and stretch it out into a movie. Almost.
Yeah. And that's actually really funny. It's like if it was like a 2-minute sketch about like Skeletor trying to take down He-Man, he does, and then he takes over Eternia. Is like, now what do I do? And that's funny, because it's 2 minutes long, and basically for the main motivation that's what it is for a villain. It's like with Mumra, want to take down Lionel from Thundercats, and Lex Luthor wanting to take down Superman. And
how about this? Where like remember that Dorkly short where Robotnik finally takes over the whole of what's it called? What's Sonic's universe called? Mobius.
Mobius, yeah.
It takes all of Mobius and roboticizes every single living being on the planet, and he can't remember what he did with it, and it's just this hilarious thing. And then he finally finds out, and he wants to do like an Irish band or something like that in the end. And there was that kind of like payoff to the joke. It's like I just feel like they could have done something more funny with it. I feel
yeah.
Here's a super villain. He's defeated everyone, taken over everything, and now he doesn't know what to do. It's like
exactly. Like he should have taken a lot more. It's like, I'm gonna take over this city. Okay, I'm gonna take over the world. Okay, I'm gonna take over the galaxy. Okay, I'm gonna take over the megaverse. And he takes over everything, and then he's like, now what do I do? And yeah, I think that if there would have been a lot more to that, I think that would have been hilarious. But no, it just feels like they just decided to just only go the minimum, and then afterwards then just tell a whole bunch of really interesting ideas, but it just comes across as the most cliche that you can think of.
I'll give this some movie credit. I do like the idea of like a bigger villain coming in and being a threat to Megamind, and then he finds out that, oh hey, maybe I do have some responsibilities here, and maybe I'm not as bad as I thought I was.
Sure.
And maybe he's conflicted with himself because like, hey, I'm supposed to be the bad guy here, but yeah, here's this villain being more villainous than I am. Like, yeah, and
I mean, yeah, I mean, it could have been an option is like, hey, maybe I can team up with him, or, hey, then I don't have to follow the same formula of being the bad guy because, this other guy is doing it. So, I'm going to show him who's boss or, I think there's a lot that they could have played with. So yeah, I think that we should go over to like towards the ending. So once again, the love interest is a damsel in distress as always, and then Titan is like trying to like lure Megamind in by kidnapping her and such. And then they start fighting, and then there's like this gun or something that kind of like turns it back into good or something, which kind of sucks.
No. It was the gun that reversed the serum that they gave to Hal, and then it turned
so basically you have a serum. Yeah, so basically the serum, which was supposed to make him into a hero, now turns him into a villain. It's like, going back to Syndrome again, Syndrome didn't have any powers. He used his technology to become the villain, and he had a rightful reason on why he did, because he wanted to be Incredible. He wanted to be the sidekick to Mr. Incredible, and he said no. So it's like, oh, it's not Hal's fault that he became bad. It's the serum. So it's like it kind of like puts into this bit of a predicament. It's like, who's to blame for this? It's like, it's a combination of, his jealousy that the reporter is falling in love with Megamind, even though she doesn't know it's Megamind. It's a guy in disguise. But, maybe it could have been. I feel like the serum it shouldn't have even existed. I mean, I felt like the jealousy could have been more than enough.
Okay, so the story wasn't that good. What do we think of everyone in the movie? Like Will Ferrell's Megamind.
Yeah, and believe it or not, Robert Downey Jr. was supposed to be Megamind, but because he was busy with his other projects, especially with the Iron Man series, he couldn't do it. So yeah, Will Ferrell is Megamind, and I don't know. I mean, I think of Will Ferrell as like a comedian, somebody who's like really funny. He's been funny with SNL. He's been funny with Elf. Him as a villain, I don't know. I mean, I thought it was okay.
Well, he's not really. He starts off as a villain, but we all know that he's supposed to be the good guy. Apparently.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I Steve Carell, he's also a comedian as well with various things like The Office and such. But with you couldn't even tell that was Steve Carell with his with his accent when he played as Gru from Despicable Me. And, again, it was trying to be, leaning towards funny, but at the same time with the accent, it kind of gives him a bit of a sinister side to him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Will Ferrell, I don't know. I just couldn't really take him seriously as the villain.
Yeah. And then we had David Cross's Minion. Minion.
Yeah, David Cross, yeah. Who also played as, Crane in the Kung Fu Panda movies.
Yeah. And then we had Tina Fey as Roxanne.
Yeah, and Tina Fey, she was huge back in the day with SNL, and eventually she would be in 30 Rock.
Yeah, and then we have Brad Pitt. So.
Yeah, Brad Pitt, who also, he was in Sinbad and Sinbad: The Legend of the Seven Seas.
Yeah, isn't this kind of like a lot of this is throwback, isn't it? Like, I mean, you had AC/DC, Metallica, and you had and oh my goodness, you had all these like old throwbacks to like you wonder what age demographic this was for. And here's the thing, like with The Incredibles, they did have kind of like a 1960s soundtrack, with the booming orchestral music. Yeah, but that's an original soundtrack. I'm talking about
exactly, it's an original soundtrack, but it was trying to homage to the 60s. So you're trying to tell me that this movie takes place in a different time period? And if so, don't know which one.
Apparently, it takes place in the 80s and the 90s. No. It's like then you got. Mind you, this is going to age pretty badly, but they finish off basically dancing to Michael Jackson's Bad.
Oh, wow. I mean, to be fair, Monsters vs. Aliens had the President of the United States dancing to that one song when he's confronting the aliens. So, yeah, the thing with DreamWorks movies is that they use a lot of pop culture references and music cues that don't age very well.
Yeah, but, at the moment, like, as we record this, we've only just come off the documentary Relieving Neverland. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
so I don't know. Like it'd be interesting to see if DreamWorks decide in like later variations of Megamind if they decide to like edit that song out or
They
whether keep it
probably
in.
will. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So yeah, that's Megamind. We don't get it basically.
I mean,
It's
I do get it. I
oh
get that it was trying to be The Incredibles. It was trying to be Despicable Me. It was trying to cash in on the popularity of superhero movies that were popular at the time with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it just comes across as very generic.
It just for me, I can yeah okay I will agree I will see what was happening, but it's just not executed well.
No, it's
Am I-
not. There are so many other better concepts of villain turning the heroes that you could be watching. Go watch Wreck-It Ralph. And even though I feel that it's overrated because of those damn minions. You can watch Despicable Me because even though I don't really care too much about the minions, I despise them, and I don't really care too much about the story because it's so by the books. At least it's pulled off in a way that's very fun and it's harmless, and the concept was done better, I feel, than Megamind. So Megamind has pretty much become forgotten in terms of like the DreamWorks films, and it's one of the lowest grossing CGI films of the 2010s. We'll get to what was the lowest grade grossing much later on, though.
I'll tell you what though, I've actually just remembered one thing that also makes me kind of like dislike Metro Man much. He's got this like really curled up hair. He's got this he's in purely white, and he has this very booming voice. Doesn't he remind you of a particular villain that was in a Powerpuff Girls episode?
Yeah, yeah, Mojo Jojo.
No, Major Man.
Oh,
That
well, Mojo Jojo, he's wearing white and he has like the cockiness, but yeah, yeah, that I guess that character too, I suppose. But I mean, yeah, come on, it's like the booming voice and the white get up. It's like Mojo Jojo, except that he doesn't talk very fast, but he's very cocky. But again, I see Syndrome in this. I see Superman mixed with
Yeah,
Syndrome.
I see Syndrome in Mega Man sorry
Metro Man.
Metro Man too, but I also see I also see a bit of like Major Man of like the Powerpuff Girls
Oh, you
villain
were
in
talking
that.
about Major Glory.
No, not Major Glory, Major Man. Don't you remember that villain? He was played by the same voice actor as Johnny Bravo.
Oh, right,
Remember when
right.
he came in and he replaced the Powerpuff Girls, but except he was a
That's
sham.
right. Now I remember.
There you
Yeah.
go. Okay then. Yeah.
Yes, yes. It's like I know Major Glory's from
Major
Dexter's
Glory's from Dexter's
Lab.
Laboratory. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he almost kind of reminds me a little bit of Major Glory, with the red, white, and blue, and the booming voice and the curled up hair.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's another one that I could probably put on the list. So
Okay. Well, everyone, while Patricia starts to revise her Cartoon Network references, I think we'll
yeah, I
end
think
this one.
so. It's like, and I even saw the Powerpuff Girls recently. It's like, how could I forget Major Man? I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess because everybody else was so much more memorable. It's like Mojo or, the Gang Green Gang, Fuzzy Lumpkins, him. But yeah, okay. But I get what you're saying. So yeah, overall, with Megamind, it made about $321 million out of a $130 million budget, which is nothing compared to Despicable Me. Despicable Me had a $68 million budget and it made over $600 million. So it made double the budget
Yeah.
of Megamind. And Megamind has, again, as I mentioned, has pretty much become forgotten in the DreamWorks lineup of the 2010s. And Despicable Me, as sad as I might say, has continued on with a huge franchise with Minions.
Yeah, but Despicable Me kind of made sense because it was a supervillain who then developed who through adopting some girls developed a relationship with someone who isn't basically a minion, and so
Exactly,
I think, yeah,
right.
Despicable Me makes far more sense than I think Megamind did.
Yeah,
In my
so
opinion.
yeah, the second movie I actually did see in theaters, and where he gets a love interest, and I've never seen the third movie where it's like some villain that's actually played by Trey Parker, which is interesting. So Yeah, I and the Minions movie. I'm not gonna see it. I'm not gonna watch that damn Minions movie, even though that it's the first animated movie not done by Disney to make $1 billion, which I'm sad. But to be
Hmm.
fair, if you are into the Minions, that's perfectly fine. I'm not gonna judge you, but anyway, Megamind. Yeah, it's by the books, not really that memorable. You are better off watching Wreck-It Ralph instead.
Okay. So for me, Aaron,
And Patricia.
take care and bye bye for now.
See you later.